Hi there. Welcome to Oaklandside 510. I'm Tasneem Raja. Each week on the 510, we catch you up on some of the biggest news in Oakland, take you behind the headlines, and preview cool events around town. Here's today's deep dive conversation. Ashley McBride has been covering Oakland schools for 5 years. Here's what she thinks more Oaklanders should know about OUSD. Before that, we're going to cover some more recent reporting from Oaklandside in brief. This episode's shorter headlines include a big change to traffic enforcement in Oakland, an iconic Blue Bottle location is closing, recommendations for what to eat around Coliseum Way, and why Oakland's estuary is in bad shape and what we can do about it. Finally, Azucena Racia helps you plan your weekend in Oakland. Okay, before we dive into all of that, this is the last episode of our 10-episode pilot experiment. The first 9 episodes have been downloaded over 9,000 times. So we're averaging about 1,000 listeners per episode. From what I understand, that is excellent for a new hyperlocal news podcast. We surveyed listeners over the last few weeks and we got great feedback and ideas. If we can keep this thing going, I would love to experiment down the road with the format, with the length, how often we release this thing. You all had some really good ideas and they made a lot of sense. The overwhelming message was, please keep the 510 going. We definitely want to do that. We love recording this thing and putting our reporting out there in a whole new way. Another theme of listener feedback was that it's helping people stay way more on top of what's going on in Oakland because they don't always have time to read articles as much as they want to. This way, they can be more engaged in town and also know about cool events while washing dishes, walking the dogs, driving to work, what have you. That was our dream for this whole experiment, so that was really great to hear. Like I said, we definitely want to keep this thing going. We need to raise $15,000 to do this for another 6 months. That's to pay our freelance producer, our editing costs, equipment, recording space. We launched a fundraiser this week, and it's off to a strong start. We've already raised about 1/4 of our total in just a couple of days, but there's still a long way to go. If you want us to keep putting the 510 out each week for another 6 months, I hope you will chip in. Whether that's $10 a month, $15 a month, or a one-time donation of any amount, truly whatever you can do. Every dollar helps us secure the funds that we need to keep paying for this and hopefully make it even better with some of the great ideas that you guys shared with us. Thank you so much to everyone who has already donated. Thank you to everyone who can chip in after hearing this message. If this podcast is helping you be the Oakland resident you want to be, this is a great opportunity to keep it going. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now, let's run through some of our recent reporting in brief before we get into our deeper conversation on Oakland schools. I'm here with Darwin Bongram to run through some of our latest headlines. How are you doing, Darwin?
I'm loving this summery fall Bay Area weather.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, let's start off with our recent story on traffic enforcement in Oakland. What is happening?
I don't need to tell listeners that driving in Oakland can be dicey. Some people here treat stop signs and red lights like suggestions.
No doubt.
Unfortunately, the Oakland Police Department is disbanding its traffic enforcement unit very soon.
Wow.
That means the 6 motorcycle officers who cruise around the city and focus on enforcing traffic laws, they're being reassigned to patrol beats to cover vacancies that are currently filled with overtime.
Yeah, Oakland's traffic is notorious. Why is this happening?
Staffing shortages. The department says it's losing 5 to 6 officers per month, and there was no funding for a police academy from June 2024 to July 2025. So Chief Mitchell says this won't be the last reassignment of specialized officers back to patrol duties.
Wow. Okay, what do we think this means for traffic safety?
Yeah, Lieutenant Timothy Dolan, he runs the traffic unit. He told the city council recently that he predicts collisions are going to go up. He said Oakland is currently on track to end the year with around 40 deaths from car crashes. Between 2020 and 2024, the city averaged 33 traffic fatalities each year. So that would be a big increase. Yeah. The department currently has 644 officers, but 133, about 20%, are on some type of leave. So there's really only 511 officers actually available to patrol the streets at any given time.
Okay, last episode we were talking about sideshows, Darwin. What does all of this mean for sideshow enforcement?
OPD says the sideshow enforcement team will continue working on weekends, so that shouldn't be impacted. And all officers still have the authority to conduct traffic stops when they see violations. But I got to tell you, the reality in Oakland is that patrol officers rarely have time to pull someone over for a moving violation. I mean, their days are like, they go from 911 call to 911 call.
Got it. Okay, shifting gears. We have some restaurant news, some sad news. Blue Bottle is closing a location?
Yeah, Blue Bottle, listeners probably know, that was founded in Oakland over 20 years ago. They're shutting down their cafe in that iconic WC Morse building in Temescal this week. They've been in that historic former car dealership since about 2014. Listeners may or may not know that Blue Bottle has been owned by Nestle since 2017. The company's decision is a bummer for locals because it's been a real landmark in that neighborhood. An employee told us that declining business has made continuing unviable. The cafe has recently cut back its hours. And there was some friction between the company and its workers this summer. Cafe staff at that location organized a picket to protest the firing of a staff member after employees requested the company acknowledge their union.
There's definitely more to this story. We're going to link to the full report and all of the other reporting that we talk about in this episode in the show notes so you can learn more. We just scratched the surface here. Okay, our reporter Azucena Garcia has some good food recommendations in East Oakland. Tell us about what she rounded up.
Oh, yeah. Few people know East Oakland's vibrant and sprawling food scenes the way Azu does. For years, she's been my go-to guide for backyard taquerias, street vendors, and sit-down restaurants. I have many a happy memory of cruising around East Oakland with Azu for food.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Her newest story is about a cluster of food vendors along Coliseum Way near 50th Avenue. It's right by the Oakland Flea Market. This is a gym that's been around for at least a decade. Especially on weekends, you'll find amazing Mexican and Latin American food from these makeshift stands and converted storage containers. This place is a serious destination for foodies. People should know, though, that parking can be challenging, especially on Sundays, but it's totally worth it.
Okay. If you do make it down there, can you give us some recommendations?
Yeah. So Azucena tried everything over the course of a few weeks. So there's Honduran plato catracho, there's tacos al vapor, tacos al pastor from Puebla, there's gorditas. She highlights 5 must-try items in her story. But there's also something important happening underneath the story that the vendors told Azucena that since President Trump took office in January, they've seen a significant dip in business. Basically, a lot of customers are fearful. They're afraid to come out and hang out at a place like that and get food because of this looming threat of ICE raids. One vendor said that some of their customers are actually police officers and security guards. And, when these groups show up, other customers, drive away because they're a little confused or, afraid of what's going on. They think it might be ICE and
right.
Yeah. Despite this, Azu reports that vendors remain hopeful and they're finding ways to support each other. One of the vendors told her, "We get calls from customers asking us if we're okay and if we're safe. Even when business is slow, all the vendors are supporting each other."
Last headline. Tell us about what's going on at the Oakland estuary. I know you recently went out on the water with our podcast producer, our former Nature in the City reporter, Callie Rhodes, onto the Oakland estuary, and you guys found some weird stuff out there. What's going on?
Yeah, Callie investigated this problem that's been festering for years now. The Oakland estuary, that body of water that is between Oakland and Alameda, is filling up with sunken boats, marine debris, and trash. So Callie actually went out on a paddleboard to see firsthand what's going on there. And I got to say, I love this assignment because it gave me an excuse to take my little kayak out along with our contributing photographer, Estefany Gonzalez, to accompany Callie.
Nice. So what did you guys see?
Sunken boats everywhere. Some of them just lurking right below the surface, covered in algae, rusting heaps. There are like clusters of dilapidated boats that are just barely floating, many of them illegally anchored.
Illegally anchored? How does that happen?
Yeah, when boats are left at marinas because someone can't pay the slip fees or afford repairs, they often get auctioned for almost nothing. And sometimes the people who buy them also can't afford to maintain repairs. So they anchor them illegally in open water, and some of these boats can eventually sink. Wrecked vessels release oil, gas, other contaminants into the water and pose navigational hazards. Plus, there's just like mountains of trash accumulating along the shoreline.
Oh, this is a shame. How did things get so bad?
Apparently, it's a jurisdictional tangle between the city, the county, the Coast Guard, and others. As one person told Callie, everyone says not it and moves along when discussing what the solution to the problem is. And the Oakland Police Department's Marine Patrol Unit is basically one officer who obviously, can't single-handedly solve this problem.
So many of us really value living near the water around here. Can we do anything to fix this?
Yeah, Oakland got a $3 million federal grant in 2024 to create a prevention program for abandoned boats and to address all this marine debris, all the trash that's washing up. But there have been bureaucratic delays. So the city says they're hoping to complete the work by the end of 2027, though they might need an extension.
All right. This has been a lot to cover. As I said, we're just scratching the surface on these stories. So I really encourage people to check out the full reporting at oaklandside.org. Thank you for walking us through all of this, Darwin.
Yeah, happy to be here, and congrats to the Ballers.
Yeah, go Ballers. Oakland's baseball team, in case you didn't get the cool news, they just won the Pioneer League Championship.
Yeah, totally crazy. They broke the league's modern era record for the number of wins in a season.
Yeah, this is a brand new team. It's a big accomplishment. Okay, up next, we're going to go deeper into one story. Our schools reporter, Ashley McBride, is going to join me to talk about the state of Oakland public schools. In today's deep dive conversation, we're asking, what is really happening in Oakland public schools? I've mentioned on this podcast before, I'm the parent of a very young child who's going to be heading to grade school soon enough. I have so many questions about OUSD, how things work, what are the pain points, what's working well? And every time I have a question, I of course turn to the reporting of Ashley McBride. To help us understand what's really happening in OUSD, Ashley, who's been covering OUSD for over 5 years, is going to allow me to just pepper her with questions that I'm sure some of you have as well. Ashley, thank you for joining me.
Hi, Tasneem. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I thought it might be helpful at the top of this conversation to throw out some numbers and to just give everybody a sense of scope of who and what we're talking about here. So before we get to Ashley, here are some key numbers that I think are going to help us ground this conversation. OUSD serves about 34,000 students across roughly 80 schools. That's down from about 50,000 students 2 decades ago. The district employs about 3,000 teachers and staff, and it operates an $800 million annual budget, spending about $23,000 per student each year. And while most Oakland kids attend traditional district schools, about 25% of public school students are attending charter schools, and a smaller percentage of Oakland students go to private schools. Okay, hopefully that will help. Ashley, let's get into it. Here is where I want to start. You are the only reporter covering K-12 education in Oakland full-time. That means you're often the only reporter at Oakland school board meetings. Can you give us an example of why it's so important that you are physically in that room?
I think it's crucial to be in the room just to be a witness to what's happening. You can get insights from being in that room that you don't get from, watching online or over Zoom. The lead crisis that the district is dealing with right now spilled out into the open at a meeting last year. It was the first meeting of the school year, and this topic wasn't on the agenda or part of any reports for that day. But a group of parents and teachers from one school spoke up during public comment and demanded answers. And because I was in the room, I was the only reporter there, I was able to not only report on that, I could approach the community members in person and interview them on the spot.
Okay, I want to get wonky for a second here. The school board is the main decision-making body, right, of OUSD, but OUSD is also influenced by a lot of other stakeholders. Like, when we say the district, what does that really mean? Who are the main players shaping education in Oakland?
So there's the board, which includes 7 elected directors representing the 7 districts in Oakland. Their main charges are hiring and evaluating the superintendent. The board is also responsible for passing the budget, and there's also constant back and forth there. There's 2 student board directors who are elected by their peers. Their votes are recorded, but they're just preferential, so that means they don't affect the outcome of board decisions. OUSD also has various parent advisory committees. There's citizens advisory boards for the parcel tax measures that the district has. There's also the charter school sector. And as we mentioned at the top, charter schools educate about 25% of Oakland public school students, but the school board has a more distant oversight role in regards to charter schools. Charter schools are public schools and they receive public funding, but they have their own boards, their own governing bodies, their own organizations that run them. They've had kind of a tenuous relationship with OUSD because they do receive that attendance-based funding. And so when students leave OUSD schools to enroll at charter schools, that money follows them.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, zooming out for a second, we all know that OUSD gets a bad rap. There's this perception that the district is deeply dysfunctional, it's perennially in financial crisis, it's academically failing its students. In your estimation, is this narrative surrounding OUSD fair, or are we really just talking about like broader problems with American public schools?
That's a really good question. I think it's a bit of both. A lot of school districts are experiencing similar circumstances to Oakland Unified right now. Last year, I attended this training on school finance, and I was maybe one of 3 journalists in the group, but everyone else there was a school board official from small rural districts to suburban and urban districts. And they were all there because they wanted to know how to make the funding picture work. They're all confronting declining enrollment, lower revenues, trying to pay for educating students who need all kinds of resources and support, paying high enough salaries to teachers to retain them, renovating and maintaining aging school buildings, and providing all of the extracurriculars and programming that families like. That's not a unique conundrum to Oakland Unified. But what is OUSD's long-standing problems with financial mismanagement and the resulting distrust and skepticism that a lot of community members have towards the board, the superintendent, the county, and the state. And that's something that Oakland Unified is really going to have to work through.
Can you stay on that point about financial mismanagement for a second? What are we talking about when we say OUSD is not good at managing money?
So back in 2003, OUSD was taken over by the state because they were in debt. They were facing insolvency. And the state extended a $100 million loan to the district to bail them out, and also came in and essentially took it over. The district was being run by a state-appointed administrator and not the elected school board. And so for years, OUSD has been digging out of that hole. They've had to pay back that loan, which they did a few years ago. But that meant that $6 million or so every year was going to a loan and wasn't going to schools or salaries. Over the last 20 years, probably the biggest driver of the district's financial problems has been the drop in enrollment. OUSD has lost about 15,000 students. And in California, school districts are funded based on attendance. So as enrollment goes down, attendance necessarily goes down. And OUSD is still largely running the same number of schools they were 20 years ago. So that's why the school closure issue is a perennial topic, because a lot of people feel we've lost a lot of students. We don't have enough bodies to be running those schools. We need to close some schools to save some money.
So we're talking about declining enrollment. I'm wondering how can we tell whether Oakland schools or a specific school is doing well or not so well? What metrics do you pay attention to? What metrics do, educators and district officials pay attention to?
Sure. So the first one that probably comes to everyone's mind is test scores. California has standardized tests that all students take. And in Oakland, they aren't great. A local parent group called Families in Action released a report recently that across Oakland, across public district and charter schools, fewer than 4 in 10 students are on grade level in reading, and less than 3 in 10 are on grade level in math. And statewide, those numbers are not much better. 47% of California students are on grade level in reading and 35% in math. And we could talk forever about what those numbers mean, disparities across race and class. There's a lot to unpack there. What those scores don't reflect is growth over the year, and that's something that can tell a different story, like where students are when they started the year and where they are when they end. But beyond that, I'm working on a story right now about principal stability. That's another data point that people can look at. How long has this principal been at this site? There's graduation rates, college enrollment rates, suspension rates, and disciplinary data. But honestly, data paints a very limited picture, and there's so much you can learn from actually going to campuses, seeing how students interact with their teachers and other adults, seeing the murals on the walls and the brand new playgrounds, seeing the principal greet everyone by name. I love going to visit schools for all of those reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, when you hear from, students and parents and educators, what are some of the most positive things you tend to hear about Oakland schools?
Yeah, I think people love the diversity within Oakland schools, within the student body, within the staff and leadership of the schools. So many people who work in Oakland schools attended them themselves. And I think that is something that's unique to Oakland, is so many people grew up here and want to give back through the schools. I hear from a lot of parents who say one of the reasons that they want to send their kid to an OUSD school is because they get to meet other children from all walks of life. My editor, Esther, is a mom of an OUSD student, and she also has mentioned the diversity and the commitment to equity that OUSD has, from the superintendent to the board down to teachers and school staff at sites. People really care about making sure that everyone is supported and everyone's viewpoint is respected. OUSD has an entire office called the Office of Equity, and they have various programs within that office. They have programs for Arab students and Latino students. They have a lot of supports for newcomer students. I recently wrote an article about how the Immigrant and Newcomer Students Office is kind of beefing up their support right now in light of all of the attacks on immigration. I recently was interviewing an OUSD graduate, and one of the things that he mentioned that he really loved was a program when he was in elementary school, the African American Male Achievement Program, which is where they have Black men, Black teachers, Black educators, community members come into the schools and just be mentors for the young boys and give them, a positive male figure to look up to.
Okay, we have to get to the flip side of that question. What are some of the most common negative themes that you hear from Oakland school stakeholders?
While people love their schools, they love their teachers and principals, a lot of people criticize the central office, the school board, the people who are furthest away from the school site. The district's constant money problems means that there's always more that schools need. There's always more that students need, whether it's more resources, more programming, more staff. I wrote a story last month about teachers turning to fundraising sites like Donors Choose and GoFundMe for school supplies for their classrooms because there's just never enough money to go around.
I know you've also been reporting on teacher housing. Can you tell us about, where that fits into the equation? And also, are we seeing, any developments in creating more affordable housing for Oakland teachers?
Yeah, a lot of districts in the Bay Area and actually around California are turning to staff housing as a way to retain educators because, as we know, the cost of housing and the cost of living is really expensive here. OUSD has in the past planned to build teacher housing. They've designated a few of their vacant properties for housing. Those projects have kind of stalled out, and those properties have since become more blighted. And there is definitely an urgency for the board to figure out what they're going to do with those properties. OUSD has done surveys of their staff and found that housing and the cost of living in the Bay Area is the number one reason that makes people want to leave the district.
Right.
And so we're seeing other districts like San Francisco and Berkeley get their teacher housing projects stood up, and it certainly will be competition for Oakland Unified. And teacher housing would be, if OUSD wants to partner with a developer to build an apartment building that would be purely for teachers or staff in the district to live in.
Can you tell us more about this teacher workforce? Who teaches in OUSD and how is that workforce changing?
Sure. So Oakland Unified does have a very diverse workforce. It doesn't quite mirror the student population, which is something that the district has been striving for, because we have research that shows that when students of color are taught by teachers who look like them, it increases their achievement rates. So OUSD has various programs where they try to train, school staff who might be the front office workers or a literacy tutor to get them into a credential program to become a teacher. Yeah. Because OUSD really values those community members. And I think it's also a value of Oakland in general to have, family and friends and neighbors be a part of the school community. OUSD has around 3,000 teachers, and about a quarter of them are in their first 5 years. A quarter are at years 6 to 10, and there's fewer at the higher ends of experience. And for a long time, the salary schedule that teachers were on stopped going up after year 10. I think from years 10 to 15, people would get the same salary. And so that led a lot of teachers to leave at that point.
Right.
That's been fixed following the last contract, so we may see more teachers stay at that level of experience. About 85% of OUSD teachers stay from year to year, and negotiations with OEA are underway right now. Teachers have asked for a 10% raise, so we'll see where they land.
The stuff I want to ask you about just keeps stacking up here. You're bringing up so many interesting things. Okay, I promised I was going to get to charter schools. So Oakland has 38 charter schools. The city has been divided for a long time about whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. That debate has been going on since at least the early 2000s, when I know from your reporting that number of charter schools in the city suddenly went from just under 10 to over 30. Now, there's still a divisive topic, but it seems to me that this is a less charged debate than it was when we launched this newsroom 5 years ago. Does that sound right to you?
I think so. I would agree with that. When I started on this beat, I believe there were about 45 charter schools, and now there's 38. So a few reasons why I think they have been less of a hot topic is because their charter schools have been closing. Charter schools have seen their enrollment declining at a faster rate than OUSD schools have. There's also a fewer number of charter schools existing in Oakland. They're just not as much of a constant presence at board meetings.
Okay, I want to take us to, the end of our conversation with a very difficult subject. Ashley, you've covered multiple rounds of school closure fights over the years. You've been through this cycle where the board will consider closing or merging a school. The parent community might get really upset about this. There's a lot of pushback. Why do you think we're having this same fight over and over again? Why aren't we getting anywhere here?
I think schools are community assets, and people love their schools and they don't want to see them close. But there are people who are always going to be against school closures and never think that that is the right solution. There are people who are already convinced that OUSD needs to close schools. But I think there's a lot of people in the middle who could be persuaded if they felt the district was making a compelling argument. And in the past, their argument has simply been, we have too many schools for the number of students that we have, so we need to close schools. And that doesn't resonate with people because they view their school communities as more than just a number. They view their kids as more than just a number. They want to know that their kid is going to be okay if they're at a school that's closing. What is the plan for them? If we're at a school that, we can walk to in our neighborhood, but now that school closes down, how am I going to get my kid to the next school over? A lot of times when OUSD has closed schools in the past, they don't do anything with the property and it languishes. So people really want to know that the district is fully thinking through all of the implications of closing schools and not just seeing dollar signs.
Okay, to close this out here, Ashley, looking ahead, what stories or perspectives in Oakland education do you think aren't getting enough attention?
Yeah, I think, I'm only one person, so I can't cover every story, but there are gems everywhere at every school. And I would just recommend that people get out and visit your local schools, volunteer at them. They have events. Crocker Highlands Elementary is celebrating 100 years this weekend.
Wow.
They're having a community event. So, get out there and learn about what's going on in your neighborhood.
Thank you so much for helping us understand what's really happening in Oakland schools and for all the work that you do to keep Oakland families informed. Ashley McBride, everyone. You can find all of Ashley's education reporting at oaklandside.org. Coming up, we're going to hear about weekend events in Oakland. I'm here with Azucena Recia, Oaklandside's arts and community reporter, to help you plan your weekend. How are you, Azucena?
Hi, Tasneem. Happy to be here.
All right, let's start with Friday night. What's happening?
Yeah, so Friday night, there's a free open mic at Discover Community Cafe in West Oakland. Author and poet J.R. Rice is hosting the Get Hype open mic. It's open to any poet, musician, comedian, or storyteller. They can perform up to 2 pieces as long as it's under 10 minutes total. This cafe has been hosting all kinds of community events since they opened in April. Things like game nights, art workshops, clothing swaps, and much more.
Oh, love that. Okay, that is Friday, September 26th from 6:30 to 9 p.m. at Discover Community Cafe in West Oakland, and it's free.
Looking at Saturday, there are a couple of events I want to share. First, the Friends of the Oakland Public Library are celebrating their 75 years with an open house at their Bookmark bookstore in Old Oakland. They'll have Oakland's Library Director Jamie Turbach speaking, plus a performance by Oakland's 2025 Youth Poet Laureate Kyle Duenas-Lara and book giveaways.
That is the library celebration, Saturday, September 27th from 12 to 4 p.m. at the Bookmark bookstore. That's at 933 Broadway, and that's also free.
Also on Saturday, there's a community reception for an Oakland art fundraiser benefiting Gaza relief efforts. Kathy Kenny, whose grandparents were born in Palestine, is working with 18 other artists to raise funds for the Middle East Children's Alliance, which provides emergency aid and clean water to families in Gaza.
The Gaza Relief Art Fundraiser Reception is Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Grand Gallery on 2nd Street.
Moving on to Sunday, there's a fundraiser for On Lewd Books, a multicultural feminist press that recently lost a $75,000 National Endowment for the Arts grant, part of the cuts by the Trump administration. They're celebrating Chicana author Gloria Anzaldua's literary legacy with readings by Oakland author Jewel Gomez and Aida Hurtado. That is Sunday, September 28th at 1 p.m. at the Green Lining Institute on 14th Street. I also want listeners to know about an ongoing art exhibit at Laney College that's worth checking out. It's called Stoked, and it features wood-fired ceramics from more than 36 artists across the United States. The exhibit runs through December 5th. Oh, very cool. The Laney exhibit is in the June Steingart Gallery at the Laney Tower. Lastly, looking ahead, this is a show that I'm super excited about. Cash Money Millionaires is doing their 30th anniversary tour in December at the Oakland Arena. So that's bringing Cash Money members Birdman, Manny Fresh, Juvenile, and BG. The Cash Money show is on Friday, December 12th at 7 p.m. at the Oakland Arena. Okay, very cool. Thank you so much, Azucena. Thanks for having me. Okay, that was our 10th episode. Thank you for listening to Oaklandside 510. This has been a really cool experiment. As I was saying at the top, we want to keep the 510 going. We just started a fundraiser to raise $15,000 to keep recording and putting this out there for another 6 months. We're about a quarter of our way towards the goal, but we still have a long way to go. If you're listening to this and you love this podcast, I hope you will chip in. And here's the thing, your support won't just power the podcast. You know, our reporting is free for you and all of your Oakland neighbors to check out, but it costs real money to cover Oakland with the depth and attention it deserves. If you become a member to support the 510, you're supporting our entire newsroom. Thank you so much. By the way, if you would like to advertise on this podcast, we would love to talk. That email address is editors@oaklandside.org. Lastly, thank you to Darwin Bongram for walking us through the headlines. Thank you to Ashley McBride for telling us more about what we all need to know about OUSD. Thank you to our arts reporter, Azucena Recia, for keeping us in the know on weekend activities and upcoming events. Thank you for listening. Thank you to every one of the 4,000 Oaklandside members who keep this work going by donating around $10 a month.
This show was produced and engineered by Callie Rhodes. Esther Kaplan was our editor. I'm Tasneem Raja. And you'll hear from me one way or the other next week. Depending on where we are with our fundraiser, we may be putting out a full episode. Fingers crossed. I would love to do that. Or we'll let you know where we're at, keep you in the loop on a little bit of Oakland news, and keep encouraging you to chip in and get us to our goal. I'll see you next week.